All right, today thanks everyone. I'm going to be talking about Guatemala postal history. This is an overview, and I imagine a lot of you are advanced postal history collectors, but some of you may just collect postal history or just Guatemala stamps. So for those of you, it will be an introduction to postal history. Guatemala is a pretty mountainous country, as you can see from this map, and so that's determined some of their difficulties with their postal service over the years. This whole range of mountains across the lower center of the country is volcanic, of course. And one of the interesting things about Guatemala is they have these lahars. Every time there's a volcanic eruption, it produces tremendous amounts of ash and lava of all sizes. And then they get tropical rains and they get these tremendous mud flows. And a few years ago, on the shores of Lake Atipan, there was a village that we visited when we were there in 2004. It was completely buried and destroyed by one of these lahars or mud flows. So that's a pretty hazardous, that's a hazard Guatemala has that many other places don't. This is a El Correo store in Antigua, and it's pretty unimposing. When you go in, it's even less imposing because you have one clerk sitting behind a desk. You ask for stamps, he pulls a drawer over and throws out what he has on the table, and you pick and choose. That's it. And of course, now this is gone. Guatemala doesn't have its own postal service now, but they're talking about doing it again, so hopefully they will. All right, we're going to start off with looking at the rarest covers. Some of these I don't own, unfortunately. I wish I did. Here's the only cover of its type using number 1 and 2 of the 10-cent blues.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID.
I don't know what that is, but we'll ignore it. And so this is like a $5,000 cover. This is quite rare, one of a kind, perfect condition. Everybody wishes they could own it. Another one, quite nice. The $1 yellow. Look at the postal markings on this. One of the things about postal history is for exhibit purposes, it's rate, route, and cancellations. But for general postal history collectors, it can be anything you want. You can collect by destination, or some people collect just one stamp in its use, cataloging its use over time. Some people just do first flights, and on and on and on. So there's really no limit except your imagination. Here's one of the Indian women on cover. Again, it's a beautiful cover, great cancellations. These are all exhibit quality covers. This is probably a $2,000 to $3,000 cover. Here's one of the large quetzals. And Dave has some of these. Dave Reitzema, who just joined us. This one's interesting because it's the Liberty head used to Genoa in Italy, and postage due. So you've got the bonus of having postage due stamps, which is always makes something much more collectible. And it's quite rare. This is one of a kind cover. And the overprinted Indian women, again, very rare. Hardly any of these are known. And here's the famous rail bond issue. Again, there's a handful of these known. Most of them were never survived, and very few of them were actually used on cover. And here's the regular quetzal issue. This is one of my covers. I got this a few years ago. Very attractive. Again, good cancellations. There's a cut in the envelope. I'm not sure why, if it's maybe when it was open that happened. Another quetzal. Here's one of the rarest things I have in my collection. It's a postal card from the first issue, and nice cancel. Dave Reitzema tells me there's just a few of these known, probably less than a hand, less than 5. So quite rare. Nobody saved these. People that did collect Guatemala during this time period collected stamps, not postal cards. So you can see this is an early cancellation, 1879. And of course, it was used locally. Here's another postal stationery piece. It's hard to make out the cancellation on it, but it's September 20th, 1877. I blew it up on the one side. Again, very few of these were saved. This is used internally, Guatemala City. And it was common at the time to not cancel the indicia just elsewhere on the envelope. Official mail. This is one that you could really specialize on because there's a fair amount of official mail from Guatemala to other parts of the world. This is the triangle issue. Very, very colorful, and it's just an intriguing cover to look at it because of the way they put the stamps on. Here's another one. I'm not quite sure. You can't tell from this cover who sent it, but here's the stamps in the back, and this is part of the perforated official issue that's not recognized by Scott. So here you can see the official perforated end of the stamps, and there's some varieties of these. Finding these on cover is not easy, and so it's always a treat to see a new one. Here's another example of some of the perforated, or these aren't the perforated officials, these are the stamped officials with a rubber stamp. And these are hard to find too. Again, not recognized by Scott. Maybe Michael can do something about that because these certainly deserve to be recognized by Scott as official issues by the country. More of the perforated officials, and this one's particularly interesting because they were sending this to a Guatemalan official in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida. He wasn't picking up his mail. So, look at all the stamps, overprints on this. Here's the reverse, or here's a close-up of the official stamps. And then here's the reverse. Second notice, you noticed on the first one here, last notice. So this was sent back to Guatemala. Guy never did pick up his mail. Registered mail, 3 notices, sent back. So that's something you don't see every day. Here's another one with the official perforated stamps. Most of these are from the 20s. One thing I've never seen on cover, which I'd like to see, is the first official stamp issue used. I've not seen it. It's got to be extremely rare. All right, so a few picture postcards. Of course, early postcards, you weren't allowed to write on the front. The address had to be on the back. You could write, a brief note on the front, but the address is on the back. Here's a bullfight in Guatemala. Here's the stamps on the back to Switzerland. One of the things you can do with postal history is collect unusual destinations, and I'll show you some of those in a minute. Here's a Mayan woman with a baby on her back, and you can see custom of the time was to write a note on the front, and then the address is on the back. Again, good cancellations. And this was to Belgium, not a common destination, but not a rare one either. Here's some workers, look like agricultural workers in Guatemala. Here's a great shot of a volcano. Now this is interesting because this is supposedly in Salvador. So somebody must have been doing a grand tour of Central America. They picked up a postcard or picture postcard in Salvador and mailed it from Guatemala. This was to Potsdam in Germany. Here's someone may know what this picture is. I'm not familiar with this in Guatemala. It looks like a ruin, maybe destroyed by earthquakes. And it's sent at Christmas time. And here's the postage on the back to Lausanne in Switzerland. Lake Atitlan, one of the more beautiful places I've ever been. I'm a Titlan in this case. Volcanic crater. Periodically, the crater is got a gap in the bottom in the caldera, and periodically that gap opens up and the water drains out until it's filled in again by silt or something. so they can have catastrophic water level changes on this. And this was affixed two of the revenue overprints. So again, not too common. Good Mexican cancellation on it as well. Went through Mexico to go to England. Banana plantation. And the postal markings on the back. This was something else I haven't seen too, it must be more common than I think, but these are two women who traveled in Guatemala that had a picture postcard made of themselves and then sent back to friends in the States. This came into my shop when I was a stamp and coin dealer. And of course, when I bought the collection, I glommed onto this immediately. One of the Guatemala buildings, looks like quite ornate. And here's the indicia and the stamps in the back. All right, now we're going to take a look at postal stationery and postal cards. These are sleeves for periodicals or newspapers. And most of you have probably seen these. They're not as common used, and this is a good example of a used one. There was one earlier one done with the quarter quetzal, and that is quite rare. I saw one at auction recently for $1,800. So I was a little out of my price range, but quite rare. That's the only one I've ever seen. Here's a nice cancellation. Went through Livingston from going to, what does that say?
España.
Yes, to Spain. Here's another one, a little bit earlier. This is an early use of this. Here's a leaf cancellation going to Coban. This is used internally in the country. Nice star cancellation, then a leaf on the indicia. You don't see that very often. Here's cancellations with the 5 centavo postal stationery and an added stamp to cover international postage. And the stars on them are distorted, so maybe whoever was canceling this with their cork cancellator hadn't kept it in good shape, as the stars are sort of wavy and irregular. Here's one to Budapest, not a common destination, registered mail with a 10-cent post horn on it. Here's the overprinted 6 centavos. They raised the rate, and again, it's registered to Potsdam with a 20 centavo and a 1 centavo stamp. Here's one that had postage due put on it with a US 2-cent stamp at the time. So that's something you don't see very often. And there's no postage due marking. They just put the stamp on it and canceled it. Here's the 1 centavo card for interior use. Here's an unusual destination sent to Bohemia, Austria. At that time, the Czechoslovakia was part of the Austrian Empire. And here's the cancellation on the back, the receiving cancellation from Trudem, or however you pronounce that, somewhere in Bohemia. Here's another 6 centavo overprint. And it's got the 1897 issue on the back, 2 pairs. These stamps are only valid for use during that 1897 year. And so they're not rare. You see quite a few of these in most of the denominations. Another of the 1 centavo card. This was sent by a stamp dealer, Icom. I think he's well known. And he sent a tremendous amount of mail out overseas. Here's an interesting card to England. And the reason this is interesting is the indicia to the lower left corner says "gone away." So this never reached apparently the person it was sent to because he had gone away. Here's the 1 centavo card again. And this was international destination, which wasn't supposed to be used for. And you notice it's got a 200 centavo stamp that's been cut up. It's missing its perforations. So 225 centavos, or 2 pesos 25. Not seeing another one like this, and I'm interested to understand why this stamp was used. It seems like it grossly overpaid the postage. And it doesn't seem to be a philatelic cover, so who knows? The 3 centavo again with the additional postage. This is going to Cartagena in Colombia via Panama, so nice postal markings. And this is from a stamp dealer as well. And he's talking about what he can provide to the collectors. It's sort of interesting. So again, this is the only one of these I've seen. Here's a 3-cent red to New York. Again, another stamp dealer talking about, this is somebody looking for stamps. Here's a later postal card with the famous railway bridge on it in Guatemala. This is used internally. Here's a famous, fairly rare postcard. Was issued in 1935, and I've only seen commemorative cancels on this. I haven't seen one that's actually just regularly postally used. Here's a blank. Here's the back side. So here's the front. Here's the back. I got this at an auction from a place in Germany. It was the only Guatemala item in the whole auction. And here's that commemorative cancellation on the front. And that I don't own this one. This is one I saw in an auction catalog. Here's a legitimate Galusser cover. Dave Reitzema has some of these, I think, but everybody probably has some Galusser covers because there's hundreds of them. Not as many legitimate ones. This was actually sent to Budapest, used in the regular mail. Galusser was notorious for going to the post office and putting just all kinds of postage on the cover and having it hand canceled, then handed back to him. Now here's one of the notorious hand canceled philatelic covers that Galusser did. I don't know, Dave, does anybody know how many of these are actually done? Dave may not be on now. Here's another one. Some of them are very elaborate. I mean, just stamps that make no sense at all. Here's one from this is the steamship service offered by United Fruit Company. They had these big white transport ships for transporting bananas from Guatemala back to the US. And you could actually book passage on those as well. So you could ride along with the bananas. But this is a cancellation. You don't see too many of these anymore either. Very interesting that somebody would ride a banana boat to go somewhere. This is a postcard, also with the steamship service from the United Fruit Company going through New Orleans. And here's the front of it. So this is the wharf where you took off on the ship. This is an interesting cover. In fact, it's going to be in the next El Quetzal. This is a cover sent to Sedco, Washington, and it used the 1 cent revenue overprint stamps, a block of 10 of them. I think this is fairly rare. According to Guatemala One, these used on cover were not common, and certainly a block of 10 would be much rarer. So only one of these I've ever seen. Here's a postal stationery from the 1897 exhibit, and this is sent to Bulgaria. The only one I've seen that ever went to Bulgaria. You can see the interesting postal markings on the back. And I have to think that this underpaid the postage, so it snuck through somehow. Here's one to Switzerland with postage due with the 1922 overprint issues on it. Postcard, picture postcard. This is interesting for registered mail, and again, it's from a stamp dealer. And all the postal markings on the back for receiving in New York and Guatemala City. Here's a registered mail to Buenos Aires with the post office building on the back. And this might have been a money envelope. It's got a red seal on it. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it had currency inside. Another one to New York with registration, 1899. Quite a colorful cover. This may have been philatelic, but still interesting. This guy was definitely a stamp dealer. And I think, again, this is a money envelope. Look how tightly it's sealed with the wax stamps. So somebody was paying Mr. Zekala for stamps they probably bought from him. That would be my guess. This one is sent to San Francisco with Chinese characters on it. You do find these. They're not that uncommon. So there must have been a Chinatown in Guatemala City, I'm guessing, and they probably had relatives in San Francisco or friends. Here's a colorful cover to Brandenburg in Germany. Nice. You like these 4-color covers with 20 and 25 cent, 20 centavo stamps on them. 20 centavo. Another registered cover from Koban to Hamburg. Registered twice, 2 different places, it looks like. Actually 3 times, because it has a New York registration certificate on it as well. And a lot of colorful stamps in the back. Another one with quite an assortment of stamps on it. Some of these are probably philatelic. It's hard to know for sure. Nice indicia on the back. Doesn't seem to be a stamp dealer, however. Now we're into first flight covers. Guatemala had quite a good history of first flights to various towns and internationally. I don't have the earliest ones. These are just examples. Some of them are not that attractive. Basically, they just rubber stamp them with which flight it was from what city to what city in most cases. Here's a premier flight. Some of them would have special cancellations. First flight. This one was a common one. There were a lot of these covers around. Again, Puerto Barrios. And of course, this is that famous announcement of stamps that were never issued. The only one issued was the 6-cent red to the far left. There's a couple different varieties of this, but it's interesting. It shows all the postal rates inside, and they made several hundred of these at least. Here's one to Miami. These stamps are just valid on one day. So obviously a way to get money out of collectors for these. And everybody probably has these in their collection. This isn't rare at all. Here's 2 of the 3 stamps used in strips. Flores Bataan is way north. It's not too far from Tikal. It's probably the jumping off point, especially in those days, for anybody going to Tikal. It's in the jungle, and it's the only major city up there. Here's that railway issue, 2 of the stamps of the 3 issued. Paying airmail postage. Another airmail cover, just an example of the railroad, the train and the railroad bridge. And then here's the first that 6-cent red that was issued. Here's sunset on Lake Atitlan. One of the beautiful places